Our dumb, filthy, disgusting gremlin named Soo-hyun Kim was a man who had been busy leading an intense, enduring training session with several vile women. While watching them struggle through the exercises, he secretly thought to himself that this moment had been long overdue. In the past, those same women had constantly looked down on him and treated him with disrespect, but now he believed that it was finally his turn to take revenge on them. The scene then shifted to an academic center where a baddie lecturer was standing in front of the classroom while distributing the students' test results. She was praising the students for achieving high scores and encouraging the class for their hard work. However, the atmosphere changed the moment the name Soo-hyun Kim appeared. The lecturer immediately looked frustrated, and Soo-hyun slowly stood up before walking toward her desk. She coldly told him that studying clearly was not his strength, and then sarcastically asked whether he truly intended to enter medical school. She pointed out that he was not even a foreign student, yet his Korean was worse than his English. She continued criticizing him by saying that everyone else in the class had achieved nearly perfect scores, while he was still stuck correcting simple mistakes. She angrily questioned how someone like him had even managed to enter her class in the first place. Soo-hyun quietly tried to defend himself by explaining that he had not been feeling well recently, and that he had always struggled with classical Korean literature. However, instead of understanding him, the lecturer accused him of making excuses. She harshly called him a pathetic loser and claimed that people like him always complained without ever taking responsibility for their own failures. She continued by saying that medical accidents happened because of students like him who forced their way into medical school despite lacking the necessary ability. According to her, believing that just anyone could become a doctor was both foolish and miserable. Hearing all of those words left Soo-hyun completely shocked. As he stood there silently, he reflected on the identity of the woman humiliating him in front of the class. The lecturer was also named Soo-hyun Kim, and she was the famous star instructor of the prestigious Ghana Cram School. When she had first begun teaching, many people had assumed that she was only popular because of her appearance. However, with her exceptional teaching abilities and incredible results, she had quietly risen to fame as one of the top lecturers in the country. Most students retaking the college entrance exams specifically enrolled in Ghana Cram School just to attend her classes. Since Korean had always been Soo-hyun's weakest subject, he had also joined her course despite knowing how strict she was. He remembered another moment when she had once mocked him by saying that it was embarrassing for him to share the same name as her, while Korean remained his worst subject. At that time, he had politely promised that he would work harder. However, she had responded by criticizing him even further, pointing out that he could not even solve 2 easy questions correctly. Because of that, Soo-hyun had always felt that she treated him especially harshly, simply because they shared the same name. Now, while standing in front of him once again, she reminded him that finishing in last place for 2 consecutive weeks meant automatic demotion within the academy's ranking system. The thought of being demoted instantly terrified him. She continued explaining that the academy operated on a strict, level-based system and claimed that he clearly could not keep up with the advanced class anymore. She sarcastically suggested that he should move down to Class A or B instead, where he could at least pretend to be talented among weaker students. She added that if she were in his position, she would have been so embarrassed that she would study day and night out of shame. However, she insultingly remarked that doing so would require a basic level of intelligence, something she implied he lacked completely. The lecturer eventually sighed in frustration and admitted that she was tired of repeating the same criticism to him over and over again. She coldly stated that none of it mattered anymore since she would no longer be responsible for teaching him after that day. After telling him that she did not want him disturbing the rest of the class, she ordered him to return to his seat if he understood what she had said. Without arguing back, Soo-hyun silently walked back to his desk. As he sat down, anxiety completely filled his mind. He could only think about how furious his parents would become after learning that he had been demoted at cram school. He then remembered the harsh warning his father had given him in the past. His father had told him that if he failed to become a doctor, then he would no longer have a place within the family. He had also made it clear that he would not listen to any excuses and demanded that Soo-hyun enter a Korean medical school no matter what happened. This exam was supposed to be his final chance. Because of that pressure, Soo-hyun desperately thought to himself that he had to give absolutely everything during tomorrow's exam, otherwise he might truly end up being disowned by his family. While lost in those thoughts, he suddenly noticed a small note placed on his desk. As soon as he opened it, he saw a message written inside. The note said that she had already asked him several times to study together with her, but he had continuously ignored her offers. It also mentioned that they should help each other while preparing for the exams. The moment he finished reading it, Soo-hyun immediately realized that this situation was happening to him once again. The note had come from the same girl who was quietly sitting beside him in class. While glancing at her, he thought about how incredibly persistent she was. In his mind, Only someone with extreme determination could retake the college entrance exam 6 different times without giving up. Even so, he could not understand her true intentions. The academy strictly prohibited unnecessary interaction between male and female students, and even private study sessions between individuals were banned. Because of that, he became suspicious of her motives and wondered whether she was secretly trying to eliminate her competition. At the same time, Soo-hyun bitterly reflected on how everything in his life seemed to be going wrong lately. He had already suffered enough distractions because of girls in the past, and now he feared making the same mistake again. With tomorrow's exam approaching and his future hanging by a thread, he convinced himself that he absolutely could not afford to ruin everything because of another girl. Later that night, Soo-hyun returned to his room, feeling completely exhausted both mentally and physically after everything that had happened at the academy. The moment he entered the room, another boy who had already been waiting there immediately looked toward him and casually remarked that he had finally returned. He jokingly added that Soo-hyun's class was either trying to kill him through endless studying or slowly working him to death. That boy was Taemin Park, Soo-hyun's roommate. Taemin belonged to Class D and came from a wealthy family. Unlike most students, he was not struggling financially, but he was still aiming to enter a prestigious university in Seoul. Despite his goals, Taemin usually behaved in a much more relaxed and carefree manner compared to the other students. After hearing Taemin's comment, Soo-hyun tiredly replied that if he really ended up dying one day, then his homeroom teacher would definitely be responsible for it. He continued complaining by saying that his teacher constantly targeted him and bullied him during class. According to him, she always acted bitter and endlessly insulted him in front of everyone for every small mistake he made. However, instead of sympathizing with him, Taemin reacted with complete disbelief. He jokingly told Soo-hyun that being treated that way by her should be considered a reward rather than a punishment. He explained that Soo-hyun Kim, who was famously known among students as the Ice Princess, was extremely popular because of her beauty. According to Taemin, countless male students desperately wanted to enter Class S just so they could attend her lectures and be noticed by her. He even admitted that he personally wished he could join that class as well because she was unbelievably beautiful. Soo-hyun immediately became irritated after hearing those words. He argued that there was absolutely nothing good about his homeroom teacher's behavior and claimed that people like Taemin were the reason she continued acting that way. However, Taemin ignored his complaints and excitedly shifted the topic toward the girls in Soo-hyun's class instead. He enthusiastically mentioned that Class S was filled with beautiful female students, especially Rahi-do. Taemin began exaggerating about how attractive Rahi was, and even shamelessly commented that when she exercised, she looked so amazing that she could practically dribble 2 soccer balls at once. Hearing that made Soo-hyun stare at him in complete shock and disbelief. Taemin continued rambling excitedly, claiming that Soo-hyun had no idea just how pretty Rahi truly was. In response, Soo-hyun told him that everyone in that academy had started losing their minds after being trapped in the mountains studying all day long. He seriously advised Taemin to stop obsessing over girls, focus on his studies, and avoid causing any unnecessary trouble at the dormitory. Taemin then stepped closer to him with a playful grin and confidently replied that he could manage his own studies perfectly fine without anyone's help. However, he shamelessly asked Soo-hyun to at least introduce him to Rahi someday. Soo-hyun quickly rejected the idea and reminded him that students could actually get expelled for interacting too closely with girls. He warned Taemin that the academy had strict rules regarding relationships and unnecessary communication between male and female students, so he should think carefully before doing anything reckless. Taemin simply laughed at the warning and sarcastically pointed out that Soo-hyun was speaking as if he were some kind of perfect model student himself. He confidently declared that he would take care of any problems on his own, and all Soo-hyun needed to do was help him meet Rahi. After saying that, Taemin explained that he was heading out to secretly watch Rahi during her training session before leaving the room. Just before walking away, he casually mentioned that he had picked up Soo-hyun's package while collecting his own delivery earlier. He explained that the dorm supervisor had already inspected the package, so Soo-hyun could go ahead and open it without worrying. Soo-hyun looked confused and pointed out that it was unusual for Taemin to collect someone else's package because he normally only cared about his own belongings. As Taemin prepared to leave the room, he jokingly suggested one last time that Soo-hyun should come with him because watching Rahi train would definitely help reduce his stress. However, Soo-hyun firmly refused and explained that he needed to prepare for tomorrow's exam since his entire life would practically be over if he ended up getting demoted again. After Taemin finally left, Soo-hyun picked up the parcel while thinking to himself that he really did not have time to deal with unnecessary distractions right now. However, the moment he opened the package, his expression immediately changed into complete shock. Noticing his reaction from outside the room, Taemin called out and asked whether something was wrong or if the package perhaps did not belong to him. Instead of answering properly, Soo-hyun quickly told Taemin to just go enjoy his little show before hurriedly taking the package and rushing into the bathroom. Once inside, he carefully opened the box again and became even more shocked after discovering that it contained a very unusual Sussy instrument. Along with the item, there was also a letter addressed to a VIP member, thanking them for purchasing the product and requesting an honest review after use. Embarrassment instantly filled Soo-hyun's mind as he stared at the contents of the box. He bitterly thought to himself that he did not even have a girlfriend, so there was no reason for him to own something like that in the first place. However, as he continued reading the information attached to the package, he suddenly noticed that the name written on it was also Soo-hyun Kim. At that moment, realization suddenly hit him. The package had not been meant for him at all. It actually belonged to his teacher, Soo-hyun Kim, whose name was almost identical to his own. While he was still standing inside the bathroom in complete panic, someone suddenly began knocking repeatedly on the door outside. A woman's voice demanded that he come out immediately. The moment he heard that voice, Soo-hyun instantly recognized who it belonged to. It was none other than his teacher, Soo-hyun Kim herself. Soo-hyun remained sitting nervously inside the bathroom while Soo-hyun Kim stood outside the door demanding that he come out immediately. Trying to calm himself, he replied that he was busy at the moment. However, instead of leaving, she immediately asked him whether he had received the parcel earlier that evening. He cautiously answered that he had indeed received it. She then quickly questioned whether he had already opened the package and whether he had checked what was hidden inside it. Soo-hyun awkwardly explained that the dorm supervisor had already inspected the parcel before it was delivered, so he assumed there was nothing suspicious about it. However, she firmly responded that as his homeroom teacher, she personally needed to inspect the package herself and demanded that he hand it over immediately. In response, Soo-hyun pointed out that she was not even the dorm supervisor, so she technically had no authority to inspect his belongings like that. Instead of backing down, she coldly warned him not to make excuses. She explained that if the package contained any prohibited items, then it was her responsibility to investigate the matter, because violations of the academy rules could lead to expulsion. Hearing those words made Soo-hyun realize that she was desperately trying to retrieve the package because the embarrassing toy inside actually belonged to her. At the same time, he could also tell that she was trying to pressure and intimidate him into giving it back quietly, without causing trouble. Eventually, Soo-hyun slowly opened the bathroom door, and the moment he did, Soo-hyun Kim immediately entered the room. He handed the parcel back to her while she sternly questioned why he had opened it in the first place. Trying to defend himself, he explained that the package had been addressed to his name after all, and he had been waiting an entire week for it to arrive. However, she sharply replied that the package did not belong to him, and that he should not concern himself with whatever special item was hidden inside. Trying to hide the truth, Soo-hyun casually claimed that there was nothing special inside the box anyway, and jokingly said that it only contained an electric razor, asking whether she happened to use the same model herself. Hearing that, she immediately became suspicious and questioned whether that was truly the package he had received. He calmly insisted that it was indeed the same parcel. She then began speaking in a more threatening tone and warned him to treat the situation seriously. In response, Soo-hyun finally confronted her honestly and pointed out that she had never personally checked students' packages before, so he could not understand why she was suddenly acting this way now. Instead of admitting the truth, she continued making excuses by claiming that she suspected he might be hiding prohibited items inside the room, and that she needed to inspect everything herself to ensure that he was following academy rules properly. She continued lecturing him by saying that students who neglected their studies and focused on foolish distractions instead were usually the same irresponsible people who broke the rules. According to her, if he truly intended to retake the medical entrance exam seriously, then he should stop wasting time on meaningless things. While searching around the room, her eyes suddenly landed on a small cupboard filled with various figures and collectibles. Looking disappointed, she sarcastically remarked that it made sense for someone who could not even study properly to waste his creativity and energy collecting useless items like those instead. She angrily stated that she had given him many chances already, but he had continuously thrown them away through his own carelessness. She even threatened that if he continued down this path, she would personally explain to his parents in detail why he had eventually been expelled from the academy. At that moment, Soo-hyun could only stare at her in disbelief while thinking that she had completely lost her mind. However, before the argument could escalate any further, the door suddenly opened, and another man entered the room. The newcomer was one of the dorm supervisors. Looking surprised, he immediately asked Soo-hyun Kim why she was inside a male student's room so late at night, especially since it was already close to curfew hours. He calmly explained that he had personally inspected all of the delivered packages earlier, so there should not have been any problems. Without hesitating, Soo-hyun Kim quickly covered up the situation by claiming that the student belonged to her class and that she was only giving him a little counseling session while checking whether he understood the academy rules properly since he was still relatively new there. The supervisor appeared satisfied with her explanation and casually replied that he already had the students under control, so she did not need to worry too much. He then changed the topic and began asking her about the conditions at the staff dormitories, mentioning that he would soon visit personally because he was overseeing them that year. She calmly answered that everything was fine there. However, the supervisor continued speaking in a strangely familiar tone, saying that he still needed to make sure the staff members were being well taken care of, and that this concern applied to her as well. Hearing those words and noticing the unpleasant expression on his face immediately made her uncomfortable and disgusted internally. Wanting to end the situation quickly, Soo-hyun Kim immediately turned back towards Soo-hyun and ordered him to hurry up, pack his belongings, and prepare himself for self-study hours. Soo-hyun quietly responded that he understood. After that, both the supervisor and Soo-hyun Kim finally left the room together. As they walked away down the hallway, the supervisor casually asked her whether she wanted to go to Seoul with him sometime. Once they were gone, Soo-hyun remained standing silently inside the room while processing everything that had just happened. Although he realized that he had nearly been caught in an extremely dangerous situation, he also understood that he had managed to escape safely thanks to the supervisor suddenly appearing at the right moment. As he thought about the situation more carefully, frustration slowly began building inside him. In his mind, it felt completely ridiculous for a teacher to desperately try framing or intimidating a student simply to cover up her own embarrassing mistake. He believed that she could have just honestly admitted that the package belonged to her from the very beginning. Originally, he had fully intended to quietly return it without creating any problems at all, but after the way she had treated and threatened him, he no longer felt willing to let the matter go so easily. Soo-hyun was sitting alone and reflecting deeply on his life. Just 3 hours earlier, he had been quietly thinking to himself that a single wrong move could easily lead to his expulsion from this place. That thought had been sitting heavily in his mind, making him unusually cautious about everything around him. While he was still lost in these reflections, a sudden announcement echoed through the dormitory corridors, calling all students to pay close attention. The voice from the speaker informed everyone that too many students had accumulated demerits over the past week. The announcement emphasized, in a strict and warning tone, that conversations and any unnecessary physical contact between male and female students were strictly prohibited within the institution. It further stated that they were not there to date, and anyone who intended to continue studying there next year should either strictly follow the rules or date in secret at their own risk. However, it made it clear that any violation would result in demerit points and could ultimately lead to expulsion, and the responsibility would fall entirely on the students themselves. After hearing this announcement, Soo-hyun immediately realized that a couple had already been exposed and caught again, which had caused the entire faculty to become highly alert. Observing this tense atmosphere, he began thinking to himself that perhaps this was the right opportunity to provide the department head with some useful information. He became curious about how she would respond if he presented something valuable at the right moment. With that thought forming in his mind, he took out a piece of paper and began writing something down, intending to send it to Miss Kim. At the same time, he thought that the department head was already losing control over the situation and might even turn on him later, possibly threatening him despite his involvement. Sometime later, Mrs. Kim received what he had sent and immediately assumed that she was not going to be fooled by such a trick. Meanwhile, Soo-hyun observed and realized that the department head had taken the bait completely, hook, line, and sinker, reacting exactly as he had anticipated. It seemed to him that the situation had unfolded perfectly, almost as if it had been carefully staged. Shortly after, the department head began raising his voice at her, clearly frustrated. He said that she could not possibly manage all the students in such a careless manner. While she repeatedly apologized, the department head continued speaking sharply, saying that incidents like these two major issues in a single day indicated that things were only just beginning. He added that similar matters were already spreading throughout the dormitories and becoming widely known. He also mentioned that one student had personally confessed to him, and although he had chosen to let it go, she now needed to enforce proper discipline. Furthermore, he reminded her that she must understand the consequences, stating that if the entrance examination pass rates dropped, the responsibility would rest entirely on her shoulders. Hearing this, she felt a wave of embarrassment and quietly agreed with him, saying that he was right. At the same time, she thought to herself that he was referring to something entirely different, and she was fairly certain that he did not have all the facts. At that moment, she realized that the department head was completely unaware of the package that had been involved. The department head then shifted his attention to the package itself, looking at it carefully and asking whether this was the same package that had been confiscated earlier. She immediately responded, saying that no, that particular package was hers. The department head then firmly stated that bringing personal items into the academy was strictly prohibited and that it was no surprise the students were becoming increasingly undisciplined under such circumstances. Without further discussion, he announced that she would now be in charge of the boys' dormitory and warned that if anything similar happened again, she would be held fully accountable. She responded simply with an acknowledgement, agreeing to the responsibility placed on her. Throughout the entire exchange, Soo-hyun stood nearby, listening carefully. He thought to himself that, as expected, the department head was extremely sensitive to anything involving interactions between male and female students and had completely directed his anger toward her. For once, her usually sharp tongue and condescending attitude had been placed on the receiving end, and witnessing this scene gave him a strong sense of satisfaction, almost like a surge of dopamine spreading through him. However, even then, he felt that this level of revenge was still not enough to compensate for the humiliation he had previously experienced. In his mind, he was already planning that he would deliver one final blow before bringing everything to a close. Returning to the present moment, Soo-hyun was now inside another room when he suddenly heard knocking at the door. A girl outside was demanding that he open it, repeatedly insisting that this was a crime and warning that the moment she got out, she would call the police. Soo-hyun listened and thought to himself that she was resisting far more strongly than he had expected, which made him feel slightly uneasy. At the same time, he considered the possibility that she might still believe he was Mr. Cho. The girl continued knocking and shouting repeatedly for him to open the door. Hearing her voice, Soo-hyun thought that she sounded extremely desperate at this point, and imagined that the expression on her face must be priceless, though he could not see it himself. At the same time, he reflected that if she had lived more properly and behaved like a decent person, she would not have ended up in such a situation. He then decided that he would allow her to create the opening herself rather than intervene directly. After a while, the shouting suddenly stopped, and everything became quiet. Soo-hyun began to wonder whether she had gone to call the police. The thought crossed his mind that if the situation escalated further, he could seriously get into trouble. With this concern growing stronger, he finally decided to open the door. When he opened it slightly and peeked outside, he was extremely surprised to see her there, standing and training by herself as if she were performing some kind of exercise. He did not open the door fully, and instead only looked out cautiously. After observing her unusual activity for a moment, he eventually withdrew and left the scene. Later he reflected on what had happened and thought that he had narrowly avoided being caught. He still could not believe that she had such a strange and unexpected side to her behavior. In his mind, she seemed like one of the most unusual people he had ever encountered, and the image of her calmly training herself remained stuck with him, leaving him both confused and unsettled. The next morning, Soo-hyun was sitting in the classroom, feeling the weight of fatigue on his body. He thought to himself that he had not slept properly the previous night, and the lack of rest was already affecting him. At the same time, Miss Kim was standing in front of the class, continuing her lecture as if nothing unusual had happened. Watching her, Soo-hyun found himself thinking that she looked completely normal, and he could not decide whether she truly had no shame or was simply pretending that nothing had taken place. He felt increasingly confused by her behavior and thought that he might genuinely go crazy trying to read her thoughts. However, at the same time, he forced himself to push that feeling aside, telling himself internally that he would not allow it to affect him. Despite that, he admitted to himself that he was still strangely excited about what had happened the previous night. While these thoughts continued in his mind, Miss Kim suddenly looked directly at him and spoke sharply. She told him that he should have studied in advance, and that one night of cramming would not save him from being demoted. She criticized his study method, saying it was completely wrong, and told him that he should look at himself properly if he thought he could get into medical school by studying like that. She added that it was a shame for him to approach his studies in such a careless way. Hearing this, Soo-hyun once again felt a wave of humiliation. At the same time, he thought to himself that he would take revenge for this treatment sooner or later. Miss Kim then continued, pointing out his behavior and saying that while she was speaking, he was just fiddling in his pocket without paying attention. She added that he clearly had concentration problems and suggested that he might need to work on his attention span or even consider seeing a psychiatrist before attempting any exams. In response, Soo-hyun finally spoke up, telling her that she behaved as if she were a perfectionist, yet she could not even take care of her own belongings. Miss Kim immediately shot back, accusing him of trying to change the topic and calling him the dumbest person she had ever met. At that moment, in frustration, Soo-hyun suddenly threw a piece of fabric toward her. The unexpected action completely shocked and surprised her. After this incident, both of them ended up in the consultation office, where Miss Kim was loudly scolding him. In response, Soo-hyun said that the situation had likely started because he was the one who had locked her in the storage room earlier, and that she should have been more careful with her words from the beginning. Meanwhile, A separate conversation was taking place in the office between Miss Kim and another teacher. The other teacher mentioned that there was a student in the class who shared the same name as her. Miss Kim responded that it was true, adding that it was the first time she had met someone who not only shared her name but also her surname. The other teacher then said that he had heard that the student was planning to apply to Korea medical school, and he was curious about him, wondering whether he was smart enough. He added that it would feel strange if such a student succeeded in getting in. Miss Kim replied that, despite the shared name, the student's strongest subject was Korean, and in her opinion, he seemed quite illogical. She admitted that she did not even understand why he was planning to apply to medical school in the first place. The other teacher laughed and said that it seemed like she had already become his target for stress relief. Miss Kim then added that the way he looked at her made her extremely angry, even his face irritated her. Outside the office, Soo-hyun had been standing and listening to the entire conversation. After hearing everything, he returned to the present situation and spoke to her again, saying that she had already revealed everything to the other teacher. He told her that he had not originally intended to retaliate, but since things had fallen into his hands, he had no choice now. He further added that if it had not been for the dorm supervisor, he would have been labeled as a strange man for having such an item, and that it frustrated him so much that he felt compelled to get back at her. He also commented that she seemed very interested in such training, pointing out that she had not even noticed the door opening earlier because she was so focused on strengthening her wrist grip. Miss Kim immediately shouted that his actions were a crime. Soo-hyun, however, thought to himself that he was not in a position to consider anything like that seriously. He then replied that it was not really a crime, but rather an act of helping someone relieve stress. He added that she had been in such a hurry to escape that he had even done her a favor by returning the fabric she had left behind, and that he should have received a reward instead of punishment. He continued, saying that if he posted about the incident online or revealed it to the academy, she would suffer greatly. He described himself as just a troublesome student, but said she was a well-known, top lecturer, and that while he could simply transfer to another academy, her students would no longer be able to focus if the news spread. Hearing this, Miss Kim urgently told him to stop saying such things. Meanwhile, Soo-hyun thought to himself that his father would likely be disappointed in him if he found out, and that if he backed down now, he would definitely end up expelled. Still, he continued speaking, saying that everything was now up to her. He told her that he had originally only intended to return the item and leave it at that so he could focus on his studies and get into medical school. However, after the way she had treated him that day, as if he were nothing more than an emotional punching bag, he could not simply let it go. Miss Kim responded that it was because he had been dozing off in class and not paying attention. Soo-hyun immediately countered, saying that it was her fault because he could not stop thinking about her since the previous day. Miss Kim dismissed this as a ridiculous excuse, saying that he had no advantage, since she still had the item and fabric and no one would believe him without evidence. Soo-hyun then told her that he would keep his mouth shut, and that she should do the same if she wanted to maintain her status as the country's top smart and beautiful lecturer. After saying this, he turned and left, slamming the door behind him. That night, Miss Kim returned home, and could not stop thinking about everything that had happened. As she reflected on it, she even found herself alone, performing her usual self-training program, replaying the incident repeatedly in her mind. The next morning, Miss Kim was announcing the class scores one by one. When she reached Soo-hyun's result, she stated that he had scored 96 marks and asked him to come forward and collect the attached paper from her. As he walked toward her desk, he started thinking that he had probably messed up the last question and should not have changed his answer at the last moment. He also assumed that she was going to get angry at him again first thing in the morning, and he prepared himself to hear another lecture from her. While handing the mark sheet to him, Soo-hyun admitted that he had changed his answer on the final question. Instead of reacting harshly, Miss Kim calmly explained that tricky questions needed to be read carefully in order to avoid falling into traps. She advised him to pay closer attention next time, so that he would not repeat the same mistake again. Hearing her speak in such a calm manner completely surprised him, and he immediately started thinking that she was behaving totally differently now. Miss Kim further added that he was not the only student who had answered the question incorrectly, and she reminded him to organize his notes and study materials properly. Meanwhile, Soo-hyun continued thinking that perhaps she was only acting this way because of everything that had happened the previous day. In his mind, he convinced himself that he had only been trying to scare her a little, and that she had actually been an easy target for him. After that, Miss Kim addressed the entire class and reminded everyone that the same advice applied to the rest of them as well. She told the students to make sure they carefully checked the last question so they would not make similar mistakes. After finishing the class, Miss Kim went into her cabin while deep in thought. She admitted to herself that she had been behaving very differently lately, but she could not help it. She wondered if she had completely lost her mind because she could not stop thinking about the hand endurance conditioning training. She tried convincing herself that it was probably only because of the frustration that had built up inside her for so long, and decided that she needed to take care of those feelings by herself. Because of that, she eventually decided that she would continue performing the solo cardio training sessions again. The following morning, Soo-hyun returned to class and sat at his desk while studying quietly. At the same time, he kept thinking that he still could not figure anything out. He considered asking Miss Kim about her strange behavior, but he also felt that she would probably become frustrated with him if he brought it up. However, he remembered how differently she had acted the previous day, and thought that maybe he should ask her after all. He slowly raised his hand, but before Miss Kim could respond to him, another student raised their hand first and caught her attention. Watching that happen made Soo-hyun think that perhaps she was deliberately trying to ignore him, and had already returned to her usual self again. The situation kept bothering him, especially because something around him did not feel the same anymore. It was not like the usual background noise he heard every day. After paying closer attention, he suddenly realized that there was a faint vibration sound nearby. It did not take long for him to realize that she was secretly carrying her training equipment with her. A moment later, Miss Kim turned toward him and asked whether he had any question to ask. Instead of confronting her, Soo-hyun simply replied that he had already figured it out. Later, Miss Kim went into the restroom, where she began her self-training program because she wanted to relax and release some of the frustration building inside her. While she was inside, Soo-hyun suddenly arrived outside the restroom and told her that he could hear other students approaching, and that maybe he should leave the rest to the student. Hearing him say that immediately made her tell him to come inside. Once he entered, Soo-hyun started teasing and threatening her by saying that he had completely caught her in such a desperate situation. He pointed out that she looked extremely desperate for the endurance training session together, and that even in such circumstances she still seemed continuously excited for fat-burning cardio session. Instead of denying it, Miss Kim honestly admitted that he was right. After hearing her response, Soo-hyun asked her to perform the conditioning training session together with him once again. This time, she agreed without resisting, and the two of them began performing the cardiovascular training session together. That night, Soo-hyun was lying comfortably on his bed, while his roommate, Taemin, was busy exercising nearby. While stretching and moving around, Taemin suddenly noticed that Soo-hyun looked unusually relaxed and cheerful compared to his normal self. Most of the time, Soo-hyun appeared irritated or mentally exhausted because of the constant tension involving his teacher, so seeing him in such a good mood immediately caught Taemin's attention. Taemin commented that Soo-hyun looked surprisingly happy tonight and pointed out that he was usually stressed because of Miss Kim. Curious about the sudden change, he asked what had happened during the day. Hearing that question, Soo-hyun calmly admitted that Miss Kim had behaved very differently earlier. He explained that she had not acted strict or angry like she normally did, and confessed that he felt she might continue acting that way from now on. The moment Taemin heard that, he became even more interested. While continuing his exercises, he jokingly said that he wished he could find a teacher like Miss Kim too. He went on talking excitedly, saying that simply looking at her would probably be enough to make him feel excited because she was such a beautiful and attractive woman. Taemin exaggerated even more by saying that she seemed like the perfect woman in every possible way. He then jokingly added that he also wanted to perform the fat-burning cardio sessions with Miss Kim because of how beautiful she was. Listening to Taemin speak so openly about his teacher caused Soo-hyun to quietly think to himself that maybe he should try another cardiovascular techniques her next time. At the same time, hearing another person talk about Miss Kim in that way strangely irritated him. He immediately called Taemin insane and warned him not to tell him that he had gotten excited while talking about his teacher. Taemin only laughed harder after hearing that reaction, and soon both of them ended up laughing together inside the room. Their conversation was interrupted when the dorm supervisor, Mr. Cho, suddenly entered the room for his usual inspection. The moment he stepped inside, he carefully looked around to check whether everything was normal, before asking the two students if everything was all right. Seeing an opportunity, Soo-hyun quickly pretended to look uncomfortable and claimed that his stomach had been hurting for quite some time. He then said that he wanted to visit the nursing room. Mr. Cho immediately responded in a strict but responsible manner. He explained that the evening roll call was not over yet, so Soo-hyun would have to wait a little longer. He also made it clear that he would personally escort him there, because he could not allow students to wander around alone at night. After hearing that, Soo-hyun simply agreed and waited patiently. Once the evening roll call finally ended, Mr. Cho personally escorted Soo-hyun outside toward the nursing room. While walking there, everything seemed normal at first, but the situation became awkward the moment they arrived, and discovered that Miss Kim was already present inside the nursing room. Seeing her there late at night immediately confused Mr. Cho. He looked at her curiously and asked why she was there at that hour. Remaining calm, Miss Kim explained that she had been experiencing an uncomfortable feeling in her stomach and had decided to come to the nursing room to rest for a while. After hearing her explanation, Mr. Cho looked back toward Soo-hyun and jokingly complained that this student had practically begged him to bring him there during the roll call. He remarked that students these days could not seem to do anything without relying on him. His tone was casual and humorous, completely unaware of the tension between the two standing in front of him. A moment later, Mr. Cho asked where the nurse was and wondered aloud whether she had stepped out without giving any medicine first. Miss Kim calmly explained that the nurse had briefly gone outside to collect some supplies and would probably return soon. Hearing that, Mr. Cho immediately offered to help. He said that he could go and bring medicine for her himself, and even mentioned that since he was already there, he could also help fix some of the issues in her room while he was at it. However, Miss Kim quickly refused his offer and assured him that everything was completely fine. She insisted that the nurse would return soon, though internally she was becoming increasingly nervous because she knew she could not leave the room at that moment. As she sat there quietly, she suddenly remembered what had happened earlier during her private workout fitness conditioning with Soo-hyun inside the restroom. During that moment, Soo-hyun had ordered her to come to the nursing room after the evening roll call. He had also threatened her by saying that if she refused to come, he would tell the other boys in detail about how skilled and enthusiastic she was during their high-intensity cardio sessions together. Because of that pressure, she had no choice but to keep her promise, which was why she was now sitting there in the nursing room exactly as he had demanded. Trying desperately to make Mr. Cho leave the area, Miss Kim politely pointed out that he was probably very busy and needed to supervise the other students studying inside their dormitories. However, Mr. Cho replied that he had already asked someone else to temporarily handle those duties for him, so there was no need for concern. Since he believed both of them were genuinely sick, he continued staying there without suspecting anything unusual. While waiting for the nurse to return, Mr. Cho even kindly offered to give Miss Kim a massage so she could relax and feel better. The suggestion immediately embarrassed her, and she quickly refused while insisting once again that she was completely fine. At the same time, Soo-hyun started making the situation even more uncomfortable for her. He encouraged her to accept the massage, and teasingly remarked that she would feel much better very soon anyway. Then, while Mr. Cho was distracted, Soo-hyun quietly leaned closer to Miss Kim and whispered into her ear, asking her to somehow get rid of Mr. Cho. Hearing that whisper only increased her frustration because Mr. Cho himself had been the one who brought Soo-hyun there in the first place. Still, she tried to remain calm and carefully think of a way to send him away without creating suspicion. After gathering herself, Miss Kim finally told Mr. Cho that she would keep Soo-hyun there with her for a while because he was one of her students, and she had something important to discuss with him regarding academics. She reassured him that she was perfectly fine and asked him not to worry about them. Even after hearing that explanation, Mr. Cho still hesitated slightly. He explained that since Soo-hyun belonged to his dormitory, he felt responsible for him until everything was settled properly. Fortunately for them, at that exact moment, Mr. Cho suddenly received a phone call. Looking at his phone, he informed Miss Kim that he needed to answer the call quickly. She calmly nodded and told him that it was all right. The moment Mr. Cho stepped outside the room, the atmosphere inside instantly changed. Soo-hyun immediately began teasing Miss Kim again, clearly amused by how nervous and flustered she looked. Watching her reactions closely, he started thinking that she no longer seemed as uncomfortable with his presence as before. In his mind, he felt as though he was slowly shaping and training her exactly the way he wanted. He then directly asked her whether she had become addicted to the calorie-burning sessions with a 20-year-old boy like him. His teasing words only made the tension between them stronger. After their conversation continued for a while, the two of them once again began performing their private endurance training together inside the nursing room. Before continuing, they carefully locked the door to avoid being interrupted. However, only a short time later, Mr. Cho returned and knocked on the door from outside. Hearing the knock immediately startled Miss Kim, but she quickly forced herself to stay calm. Mr. Cho asked from outside whether everything was all right inside the room. Trying to sound completely normal, Miss Kim answered that everything was fine. She explained that she was currently discussing academic matters with Soo-hyun and that there was nothing to worry about. After hearing her calm response, Mr. Cho finally became convinced that everything was normal. He quietly thought to himself that Miss Kim truly took her responsibilities seriously and had a strong sense of authority as a teacher. Believing that they were genuinely occupied with studies, he eventually decided to leave the area. Once Mr. Cho was finally gone, Miss Kim and Soo-hyun continued their full-body training session routine together privately inside the nursing room without further interruption. While Miss Kim and Soo-hyun were continuing their private conditioning training session inside the nursing room, they suddenly heard the sound of the door opening. Reacting quickly, Soo-hyun hurriedly hid himself underneath the blanket on the bed while Miss Kim remained lying there. A moment later, the nurse entered the room and walked toward Miss Kim with concern visible on her face. She asked whether Miss Kim was feeling all right and reminded her that she had mentioned earlier that her stomach was hurting badly. Trying to maintain a believable expression, Miss Kim replied that her stomach was still hurting and added that she was also starting to feel dizzy now. She deliberately acted weak so the nurse would not become suspicious of anything unusual happening inside the room. Hearing that made the nurse feel apologetic. She explained that something urgent had suddenly come up while she had gone out to bring the medicine earlier, which was why she had been delayed for so long. Miss Kim calmly responded that it was all right and acted understanding toward the situation. After that, Miss Kim politely told the nurse that she could simply give her the medicine and continue on her way because she felt bad for keeping her there for such a long time. At the same time, however, Miss Kim was nervously thinking to herself that if the situation continued like this for much longer, it would only be a matter of time before both she and Soo-hyun were discovered. Meanwhile, underneath the blanket, Soo-hyun stayed completely silent while listening carefully to their conversation. The close call only made the situation feel even more thrilling for him. The nurse then explained that technically her shift had already ended, but she still felt guilty leaving Miss Kim alone in that condition. She seemed genuinely concerned and wanted to make sure that Miss Kim was all right before leaving the nursing room for the night. Wanting to end the conversation as quickly as possible, Miss Kim reassured her once again that everything was fine. She explained that she would simply take the medicine, rest for a little while longer, and then return to her accommodation afterward. After hearing that response, the nurse finally nodded in understanding and agreed. She then walked back toward her counter to organize the medicine and other supplies. As soon as the nurse moved away and the immediate tension lessened, Miss Kim quietly relaxed a little. Meanwhile, hidden underneath the blanket, Soo-hyun remained close to her, clearly amused by how nervous she had become during the entire situation. Once the nurse was no longer paying attention to them, Miss Kim and Soo-hyun secretly continued their fat-burning cardio together inside the nursing room, while trying to remain as quiet and careful as possible. After completing the cardiovascular training session, Miss Kim and Soo-hyun slowly came out of the nursing room together. While walking through the corridor, Soo-hyun looked at Miss Kim and quietly told her that he would be more careful during the training next time and that he would make sure not to create trouble again. However, the moment she heard those words, Miss Kim immediately turned toward him with irritation visible on her face and sharply told him that there would not be a next time at all. After saying that, Miss Kim immediately started walking away as if she wanted to end the conversation there. But before she could leave completely, Soo-hyun quickly asked her to wait for a moment. His voice carried hesitation because he himself did not know exactly what he wanted to say next. At the same time, Rahi happened to be passing through the corridor by pure accident. The moment she noticed Miss Kim and Soo-hyun standing together outside the nursing room, she unconsciously slowed down her steps and observed them from a distance. The scene immediately caught her attention because it looked unusual to her. However, neither Miss Kim nor Soo-hyun noticed that Rahi had seen them together, as both of them remained focused on their own tense interaction. A few days later, the classroom was unusually quiet while Miss Kim stood at the front with the stack of test papers in her hands. One by one, she began announcing the students' scores while the class listened nervously. Some students looked confident, while others appeared anxious as they waited for their names to be called. Eventually, it became Soo-hyun's turn. Miss Kim calmly announced that he had received 98 points on the exam. The moment he heard his score, Soo-hyun felt surprised inside. He quietly thought to himself that the exam had seemed easier this time compared to before, and wondered if his assumption had been correct all along. Before he could continue thinking further, Miss Kim added that he was the only student in the entire class who had answered the 2-point question incorrectly. Hearing that made several students glance toward him with surprise, because his score was still the highest in the room. Soo-hyun calmly explained that he had started losing focus toward the end of the exam, and that it had affected his concentration during the final section. Instead of criticizing him immediately like usual, Miss Kim told him that he had still done a very good job overall. Her response caught him completely off guard. For a moment, he could not even properly process her words because he was so unused to receiving praise from her in front of the class. Miss Kim then continued speaking and explained that no one in the classroom had managed to achieve a perfect score this time. She pointed out once again that Soo-hyun was the only student who had missed only a single 2-point question. Even while acknowledging his performance, she warned him not to become arrogant just because this was the first time he had achieved such a high score in her class. She further explained that students who lack strong fundamentals often made mistakes on smaller questions because they failed to pay attention to details. But she also clearly stated that he was not hopeless. She instructed him to carefully review the question he had answered incorrectly and make sure that the same mistake would never happen again in the future. Hearing her words, Soo-hyun quietly responded that he understood and that it was fine. Even though his expression remained calm on the outside, his mind became filled with confusion. While returning to his seat, he silently wondered if Miss Kim's harsh attitude toward him had really only been related to his academic performance from the very beginning. He questioned whether she was finally stopping the insults and humiliation in front of the class simply because his grades had improved recently. The thought continued lingering in his mind because the difference in her treatment toward him felt unfamiliar and strange. Not long afterward, Miss Kim called Si-young's name and asked her to come forward to collect her paper as well. Si-young calmly stood up from her seat and walked toward the front of the classroom. When she reached Miss Kim, the teacher informed her that this was the first time she had ranked second instead of first. Miss Kim then asked if she had been feeling unwell lately, implying that her physical condition might have affected her performance. Si-young answered politely that she had been feeling fine. Miss Kim responded by saying that Se-young already understood all of the material perfectly well, so her main focus should be on properly managing her condition. She also mentioned that they did not want a repeat of whatever had happened the previous year. The moment those words were mentioned, Se-young's expression slightly stiffened, though she quickly controlled herself again. Se-young calmly replied that she understood and promised that she would achieve a perfect score on the next exam. She also thanked Miss Kim for showing concern toward her situation. Even after hearing that, Miss Kim reminded her that although the mistake had been small, she still needed to carefully review the questions she had answered incorrectly. Se-young quietly agreed before taking her paper and returning to her seat. Meanwhile, Soo-hyun observed the entire interaction from his desk in silence. While watching Se-young and Miss Kim speak so naturally, he could not stop himself from thinking that he wished these exams had been his actual concern from the beginning. Unlike Se-young, he felt uncomfortable and awkward whenever he had to interact with Miss Kim now. The recent incidents between them continued disturbing his thoughts, and he believed that he needed to focus on distancing himself from her somehow before things became even more complicated. At the same time, another thought continuously bothered him throughout the day. He realized that Rahi had been staring at him repeatedly ever since morning. Every time he looked in her direction, he would notice her observing him strangely before looking away again. Her behavior made him increasingly uncomfortable because he could not understand exactly what she was thinking. Later that day, after the classes had ended, Soo-hyun went up to the rooftop alone, hoping to clear his mind in peace for a while. However, the moment he arrived there, he unexpectedly found Rahi already standing on the rooftop. Seeing her there immediately irritated him because he already felt uneasy about her strange behavior lately. Without wasting time, Soo-hyun confronted her directly. He told her that she had been attending the boarding school long enough to know the rules properly. He reminded her that she had continuously been passing notes to him for days, and he admitted that he genuinely could not understand the reason behind her actions. He further stated that maybe she considered herself some kind of boarding school legend, but he honestly could not understand all the strange things that had been happening recently. After hearing his words, Rahi suddenly burst into laughter. Her reaction only confused him further. While laughing, she told him that she had always believed that he and Miss Kim hated each other very much. She then remarked that if things were actually like this, then it meant the rumors and legends surrounding them had truly been correct all along. Hearing her strange statement immediately made Soo-hyun feel even more confused than before. While standing there on the rooftop, he nervously thought to himself that both of them would receive penalty points if they were caught there together by the staff. Becoming increasingly irritated, he told Rahi that if she had nothing important to say, then he was leaving immediately. He also warned her not to pass notes to him anymore and threatened that he would report her if she continued doing it next time. Rahi, however, remained completely calm. She casually remarked that his grades had improved because he had done high-intensity cardio training together with Miss Kim. At first, Soo-hyun failed to properly hear what she had just said because her words sounded too unexpected to him. Because of that, he immediately asked her to repeat herself clearly. Rahi then repeated the exact same statement once again, without hesitation. The moment Soo-hyun fully understood her words, his eyes widened in complete shock. He froze in place while staring at her, because he could not believe that she somehow knew about the fitness conditioning session between him and Miss Kim. Soo-hyun thought that perhaps Miss Kim might have already told Rahi about their secret. However, almost immediately, he pushed that thought away, convincing himself that she would have to be out of her mind to reveal something like that. He tried to rationalize the situation further, considering that Rahi might have simply mistaken him for someone else, or that she might have seen another group engaged in calorie-burning session. After all, the lights had been off at that time, and visibility would have been poor. In his mind, there was no reasonable way she could have clearly identified anything. He silently told himself that the best approach now was to stay calm and act natural, to simply play it cool and not reveal any panic. Soo-hyun then spoke up and told Rahi that she must be confusing him with someone else. He tried to keep his tone steady and composed, as if nothing unusual had happened. However, Rahi immediately rejected his explanation. She told him that he was only trying to talk his way out of the situation. She insisted that she had clearly seen him performing full-body training inside the nursing room. At that moment, Soo-hyun's internal confidence began to waver slightly, as he realized that she genuinely believed she knew the truth. Rahi continued without hesitation, saying that she was curious about the exact reason both he and Miss Kim had been together there and conducting the training. She added that she was actually fine with either explanation, implying that there was no point in denying it further. She told him directly that he could simply confess because, according to her, she already knew everything. Soo-hyun quickly responded that there must have been a misunderstanding. He insisted again that there was no solid proof of any endurance training taking place. Rahi, however, immediately countered his claim. She pointed out that his Korean grades themselves were proof. She reminded him that he had always been at the bottom of the class, consistently performing poorly, yet suddenly, he had become the top scorer after the supposed training. Soo-hyun, feeling pressured, firmly denied her accusation and said that it was a ridiculous assumption. He explained that he had worked extremely hard for his marks and that there was nothing unusual behind his improvement. Rahi did not back down. Instead, she accused him of being selfish, saying that he was trying to keep the so-called legend for himself. She told him that he should have simply come with her instead of hiding it. Soo-hyun, however, refused her insistence and said that break time was already about to end. Despite this, Rahi was not convinced. She told him that she would prove it to him and immediately grabbed him, dragging him toward another section of the academy. Soo-hyun protested right away, saying that they were not supposed to be in that restricted area. Rahi, however, continued pulling him along and explained that she had discovered the place completely by accident while wandering through the hallways. She added that she had been using it since her 3rd year and that no one ever came there. She emphasized that he was the very first person she had ever brought to this place. According to her, she wanted to show it to him because she was genuinely desperate and needed him to understand. Soo-hyun, while being led along, thought to himself that he had come here expecting some kind of proof, but instead he was being pulled into yet another unclear situation. He felt increasingly frustrated, thinking that he had only intended to study peacefully, yet circumstances kept dragging him away from that goal. Rahi then explained further that this was her secret spot. She described it as something that looked like an abandoned storage room within the academy premises. She said she had been using it regularly without anyone's knowledge. She went on to explain that a few days earlier, while she was studying there and heading back to the dorms, she had heard strange noises coming from the nursing room. Curious, she had gone to investigate. That was when she saw him with Miss Kim. She added that she had already heard rumors before that moment, but seeing it with her own eyes made him the first person she had actually caught in connection with the legend. She concluded by saying that he must be just as desperate as she was in order to get into the college. Soo-hyun responded, still trying to maintain control of the conversation, saying that even if she had seen something, he still did not understand why she was so involved in it. Rahi then explained her belief in more detail. She said that there was a legend stating that if a student performed conditioning training with either the weakest subject teacher or the top student present, they would achieve a perfect score in that subject. Hearing this, Soo-hyun began reflecting internally. He remembered a case from the previous year where a girl had always been slightly below the passing mark, but suddenly achieved a perfect score in Korean after supposedly doing full-body training with an English teacher. He also recalled similar incidents from earlier years. One involved a student who had done it with a science teacher, and another with a social studies teacher. As he mentally reviewed these repeated patterns across different subjects and years, he realized that there were too many similar cases for Rahi to simply dismiss as coincidence. Rahi looked at him and said that at first she also thought it was just a coincidence. However, after seeing his Korean score, she had become completely convinced that it was not a legend but something real. Soo-hyun thought to himself that she must have taken the exam so many times that it had affected her judgment. He still did not know how to explain to her that cardiovascular training was not some kind of miracle method for improving scores. Soo-hyun told her again that she was misunderstanding everything, and that what she was describing was not logically possible. Rahi, however, insisted that she was certain of it. She then brought up another point, explaining that both Seyoung and she had always been top scorers in Korean, yet they had both missed the exact same 3-point question. She argued that there must be some kind of method or mechanism to boost scores, no matter how extreme it sounded. Soo-hyun continued to deny everything, insisting that she was misunderstanding the situation. Rahi, however, told him that she would not report him and Miss Kim if he simply explained everything he knew about the so-called legend. Soo-hyun thought to himself that she was genuinely convinced of something that made no logical sense. Looking at his Korean score and remembering Miss Kim's behavior earlier, he understood how Rahi might have reached the wrong conclusion. He also realized that, no matter how much he explained, she was unlikely to believe him. At this point, he decided that it might be better to just go along with her temporarily and end the conversation as quickly as possible. He then asked Rahi to sit down. He told her that she should at least have some awareness of what high-intensity fitness conditioning actually was if she had been following this idea for so long. Rahi immediately responded that she did not know anything about it. Soo-hyun replied that even if she had spent her entire life in a cram school, it was still impossible to be completely unaware of such things. Rahi then admitted that she did not even have a phone and had been too embarrassed to ask her friends about it. Soo-hyun thought to himself that it was surprising she had managed to live through school life with such isolation and lack of information. Rahi then said that if mathematics was her weak subject, she would need to perform cardio burning with the math teacher. Soo-hyun considered her mindset to be extremely extreme and desperate. He pointed out that she already had high scores in math, but Rahi responded that her goal was not just improvement, but perfect scores in every subject. She added that this was not the main issue at the moment, and that the priority was still understanding full-body training itself. Soo-hyun realized that she was extremely difficult to read, and felt the urgency to end the situation before the lunch break was over. He then began explaining a small part of full-body training to her, stating that there was no complex or special theory behind it. He also mentioned that he had already shown her his so-called secret spot, yet she kept diverting the conversation back to other questions instead of focusing. After listening to him, Rahi asked whether he would be able to perform endurance training again with Miss Kim. She further insisted that she wanted to witness it personally, saying that it would shock her greatly if she saw it with her own eyes. Rahi told Soo-hyun that she understood his explanation, but still insisted that she needed to see the practical demonstration of the workout session. She said that he would have to help her with it, because according to her, there had been people in the academy who had performed conditioning training before. She added that, in all her years, nearly 46 years of academy history, as she believed it, she had never witnessed anything like this until she saw him and heard the legend. She pleaded with him again, asking him to let her understand it properly. Soo-hyun reacted sharply, raising his voice and saying that this was exactly the kind of misunderstanding he had been trying to avoid. He insisted that he was not going to say or do anything that matched her assumptions, and that she was completely misunderstanding the situation. He denied her claims again, making it clear that there was nothing like what she was imagining. However, Rahi continued, saying that she was desperate and that she needed to achieve perfect scores in any case, no matter what it took. She repeated that this was extremely important to her and that she could not afford to fail. Soo-hyun replied firmly that he understood she was desperate, but told her that it was her personal problem and that she should not be dragging him into it. He said that she was unfairly involving him in something he had nothing to do with. As he finished speaking, Rahi suddenly broke down in tears. She said that she also wanted to do well on her own, but that he was not helping her at all. She explained emotionally that every time she took a test, she managed to get perfect scores in everything except Korean, and that particular subject kept causing her to repeat another year. She said her life had become a joke because of it, and she could not take it anymore. Soo-hyun, seeing her reaction, thought to himself that she was being unreasonable and even somewhat selfish. He felt that she could probably enter a good university, even medical school, without needing a perfect score, and wondered if she might be exaggerating or trying too hard to prove something. Rahi, still emotional, said that she only wanted to experience it once and that she would not rely on it again afterward. She insisted that she would not keep depending on it repeatedly. Soo-hyun then asked her directly if she really wanted to perform the fat-burning cardio with the math teacher. Rahi immediately replied that she did not want her first time to be with the math teacher, but said it felt like a compulsion she could not avoid, as if she had no other choice. In another part of the academy, inside the restroom area, Miss Kim was in the bathroom when two other students were standing nearby outside, talking among themselves in a low but animated tone. The first student mentioned that she had heard there was a new top student in Class S. She added that Se-young had been visibly shocked recently when she skipped her lunch just to study, which had already become a talking point among students. The same student continued, saying that in her opinion, it might have just been luck, because she had also heard that the student in question used to get very low marks before. She expressed doubt about how someone could rise so suddenly from poor performance to the very top. The second student responded by saying that it might not necessarily be luck, suggesting instead that the student could simply be hardworking and had decided to give everything they had. She implied that sudden improvement was possible if someone became serious enough about their studies. The third student then added another perspective, saying that Miss Kim was known for a reason and was not considered one of the best teachers without cause. She explained that Miss Kim was known for pushing competition among students and motivating them in intense ways to bring them to the top. However, she also found it strange that someone who was supposedly very weak in Korean could suddenly become number one in such a short time. She then added, in a more doubtful tone, that perhaps the student was receiving some kind of private tutoring or involved in something unusual. Inside the bathroom, Miss Kim remained silent as she heard every word of their conversation. She stood still, listening carefully, and her expression tightened slightly as she processed what was being said outside. In her thoughts, she felt that she had somehow ended up entangled in this kind of situation because of her unusual connection and recent interactions with Soo-hyun, which had already started to draw attention in ways she had not intended. After a moment, she prepared herself to step out of the bathroom. However, just as she was about to come out, she suddenly lost her balance slightly and ended up falling to the floor. The moment this happened, Soo-hyun appeared and immediately went to her, apologizing repeatedly. He told her that he had come specifically to inform her of something important that someone had already found out about them. He explained in detail that earlier, a girl had been in the corridor watching them together after coming out of the storage room. He added that this same girl had even approached him afterward and directly asked him about the high-intensity cardio session, insisting that he should perform it again, but this time for her alone. He made it clear that the situation was becoming more complicated. After delivering this information, Soo-hyun left. As he walked away, he thought to himself that if Miss Kim did not show up later that night or failed to respond properly, the situation would likely become even more problematic for him, though he did not express this aloud. Later, Miss Kim came back again and confronted him directly. Her tone was firm and sharp as she told him not to flatter himself. She said that she had only come there with one intention: to end the situation completely. According to her, everything that had happened had started because of him, not her, and she made it clear that she held him responsible for the escalation. She then explained in detail that she had already taken strict precautions. She said she had wiped out anything that could be traced back to her, including her purchase history and every possible item or record at her room and even at her parents' house. She emphasized that she had removed everything she could think of, leaving no trace that could be used against her in any way. Miss Kim then stated that there was no way anyone could possibly know about them now, and she accused Soo-hyun of trying to intimidate her unnecessarily. She pointed out that neither the dorm supervisor nor the homeroom teacher had noticed anything suspicious so far. She reminded him that she had already warned him previously that the matter was over, yet he was still trying to drag her back into it. She further threatened that if he continued pushing this issue, she would report everything directly to the department head during an upcoming major inspection, making it clear that it would result in serious consequences for him. Soo-hyun responded calmly but firmly that there was nothing he could do to change how she felt, but he also pointed out that what she currently had in her hand could also be considered strong evidence against her. He told her that if necessary, he would not hesitate to present it to the department head as well. Internally, he thought that perhaps his words had unsettled her slightly and made her more defensive. He then told her that she was the one who had brought this situation upon herself, adding that she had initially seemed willing to use the situation for her own advantage. On the other hand, Miss Kim silently thought to herself that she needed to bring this matter to a definitive end and could not allow it to continue in this unstable state. Soo-hyun then stated that he wanted to check something with her. Unknown to both of them, Rahi was hiding in another restroom nearby. She had positioned herself carefully and was listening closely to every word being spoken. Soo-hyun had unknowingly placed her in a situation where she could observe everything without being seen. From her hidden position, Rahi watched and listened as Miss Kim and Soo-hyun began what, from her perspective, appeared to be another session of the so-called endurance training unfolding right in front of her. Rahi suddenly experienced a strong flashback while she remained hidden inside the restroom. Her mind drifted back to the earlier moment when Soo-hyun had spoken to her in a hesitant but serious tone. She clearly remembered how he had told her that he was not even fully sure whether Miss Kim would actually come for the high-intensity cardio training session or not. She also recalled that he had added he did not know whether what they were doing was truly the right thing. There had been a moment of hesitation in his words, but then he had continued, saying that whatever the situation was, they should at least give it a chance and see how it unfolded. At that time, Rahi had felt a strong determination, and she had responded firmly that this was the only way forward. In her memory, she could clearly see herself insisting on it with full conviction, not allowing any doubt to interfere. She remembered how she had pushed the idea forward and how she had convinced herself that she needed to witness everything properly. She also remembered how Soo-hyun had told her to hide behind the door, instructing her carefully to stay out of sight so that she would not be discovered while observing. Now, standing hidden in the present moment, she realized that she was exactly in that same position he had told her to take. She was behind the door, concealed and silent, while the situation unfolded right in front of her. Her flashback deepened as she recalled how she had followed his instructions and taken cover in that exact hiding spot. At that time, She had not fully considered how serious or complicated things might become. She had only focused on seeing the truth of the so-called fitness conditioning session with her own eyes. In her memory, she then saw Soo-hyun standing outside and continuing his conversation with Miss Kim. The atmosphere between them had felt tense, even then, though she had not fully understood it at the time. She remembered Miss Kim's voice clearly as she told Soo-hyun that she would prepare an extremely difficult test for him. Her words had carried a warning tone, as if she was deliberately challenging him. She had said that he would be pushed back down to the bottom again if he failed. Rahi also recalled Soo-hyun's immediate response. He had not backed down. Instead, he had replied firmly that they would see about that outcome. His tone had been confident, almost defiant. She remembered how he had further escalated the situation by saying that if he ended up failing again, he would quit the academy entirely. He had even stated that he would cite teacher misconduct as his reason for leaving. That part of the memory had stayed sharply in her mind, because it had turned the entire situation into something more serious than she had initially expected. It no longer felt like a simple misunderstanding or rumor, it felt like a confrontation tied to consequences and risk. Rahi then recalled how, after that exchange, Soo-hyun had gone forward with performing the endurance training session with Miss Kim. In her memory, it felt like a turning point, as if the argument and the challenge between them had transformed into something that was being acted out in real time, almost like a condition or bet being fulfilled in that moment. As these memories replayed in her mind while she remained hidden, Rahi became increasingly aware of how deeply she had already become involved in everything. The more she recalled, the more it felt like she was no longer just observing something from the outside, but had already stepped into a situation that was far more complicated than she had originally believed. After completing the endurance training, Miss Kim was preparing to leave the room while trying her best to act as though nothing unusual had happened between them. However, just as she was about to walk out, Soo-hyun suddenly stopped her and questioned whether she truly believed that nobody had seen them inside the room together. He teasingly pointed out that she seemed to enjoy all of the strange games and activities they had been doing together during the session. His tone carried a mixture of confidence and amusement, which only made Miss Kim more irritated. In response, she quickly defended herself by insisting that none of it had happened because she wanted to participate and that he had practically forced her into the situation from the beginning. After hearing her response, Soo-hyun casually told her that he had no intention of telling anyone about what had happened between them. However, he then added a condition of his own. He confidently stated that if he managed to ace the test the next day, then she would have to honestly admit that the reason behind his success was the cardiovascular training session they had done together. Miss Kim immediately dismissed his confidence and warned him not to raise his expectations too high. She coldly reminded him that he should instead be worrying about scoring below 50, because if that happened, he would be completely finished academically. Despite her warning, Soo-hyun looked entirely unconcerned and replied that after receiving such special tutoring from her personally, he seriously doubted that he would fail. The moment Miss Kim finally left the room, the atmosphere suddenly became quiet again. A few seconds later, Rahi, who had secretly been hiding inside the cupboard the entire time, slowly stepped out with a stunned expression on her face. It was obvious from her reaction that she still could not fully process everything she had just witnessed. The following day, Miss Kim stood at the front of the classroom while announcing the students' test scores one by one. Everything appeared normal until she reached Soo-hyun's results. The moment she saw his score, her expression immediately changed into complete shock because he had managed to receive full marks on the test. For several seconds, she could barely believe what she was seeing. Deep down, part of her unwillingly wondered whether the cardiovascular training they had shared could actually have influenced the result. At the same time, Seung, who was known as one of the top-performing students in the class, also looked genuinely surprised after hearing about Soo-hyun's perfect score. The classroom atmosphere instantly became filled with curiosity and disbelief. Soo-hyun then casually walked toward the front of the class to collect his test paper. Unlike everyone else, he looked completely relaxed and confident. As he took the paper from Miss Kim, he sarcastically commented that, just as expected, all of her hard work and effort had apparently only succeeded in frustrating her instead. His playful remark only made Miss Kim even more speechless, because she still could not understand how he had managed to achieve such a result. After the class ended, Soo-hyun and Rahi met each other on the rooftop. The moment they were alone, Soo-hyun looked extremely excited and full of energy. He enthusiastically declared that the legend had actually turned out to be true and that the full-body training session really was the secret answer after all. In contrast, Rahi appeared nervous and overwhelmed as she looked at him. She pointed out that the only reason he had achieved a perfect score was because he had trained together with Miss Kim. Meanwhile, Soo-hyun quietly thought to himself that he had solved the questions the exact same way he always did, making it difficult for even him to understand what had truly changed. Rahi then became more curious and directly asked him how he had even managed to arrange a fitness conditioning session with Miss Kim in the first place. She admitted that she had always believed the two of them disliked each other and constantly clashed whenever they met. Because of that, she genuinely could not understand how they had suddenly become close enough to do something like that together. Hearing her question, Soo-hyun started explaining the entire situation from the beginning. He told her that everything had originally started when he wrote the informational report about the department simply because he wanted revenge against Miss Kim. He explained that her reaction afterward had been fairly normal from his perspective, and casually added that there was no need for him to explain every single detail because she already understood enough of the situation. After listening to him, Rahi hesitated for a moment before nervously asking whether she truly needed to go through with having a full-body training session with the math teacher as well. She anxiously explained that she could never imagine herself suddenly approaching him and asking to exercise together. According to her, she would probably get expelled before anything even had the chance to happen. She also worried that rumors would spread throughout the school like wildfire the moment anyone saw them together. Instead of comforting her, Soo-hyun bluntly replied that her situation was her own problem to solve. He reminded her that he had already fulfilled his part of their agreement and questioned whether she had already forgotten the promise between them. Hearing that, Rahi quickly tried to explain herself. She admitted that she had lost control emotionally after witnessing him and Miss Kim together during the calorie-burning session, which was why she had been unable to focus properly afterward. Soo-hyun then clarified things further by telling her that he had only agreed to show her what the high-intensity cardio training session looked like and that everything else afterward was entirely her own responsibility. He casually added that the math teacher was married and would probably be even better at conditioning training sessions anyway. After that, his expression became more serious as he told her that he was trusting her to keep quiet about both the legend and everything involving him and Miss Kim. Before leaving, he sincerely told her that he hoped she would manage to pass the exam and escape from that place as soon as possible. After Soo-hyun walked away, Rahi remained standing alone on the rooftop while completely lost in thought. Her mind kept replaying everything she had heard and seen. Eventually, she returned toward her classroom, while continuing to think deeply to herself. She started wondering whether she really should attempt the full-body training session with the math teacher after all. At the same time, she reflected on how Soo-hyun was younger than her, yet somehow seemed far more experienced and confident in handling situations like this. She reluctantly admitted to herself that he completely dominated in this area, and because of that realization, she felt that she needed to act quickly before it became too late. However, she also understood that she first needed to carefully think of a proper plan for how she could naturally approach the math teacher. Later on, both Soo-hyun and Rahi were already sitting inside math class when the math teacher suddenly began shouting angrily at Soo-hyun. The teacher criticized him for once again skipping all of the solution steps while solving mathematical problems. Instead of apologizing, Soo-hyun casually responded that writing every single step felt like an unnecessary waste of time to him. He even added that the pencils used during exams snapped too easily anyway, making the entire process even more annoying. The teacher immediately argued back by saying that such problems would never occur if calculations were properly solved mentally first. Meanwhile, Rahi quietly remained seated while carefully observing the conversation between the two of them. The atmosphere inside the classroom quickly became tense as the teacher continued scolding Soo-hyun. The teacher then angrily warned him that if he failed the exam again, he would be forced to repeat another year, which would already become his third attempt. Despite the harsh warning, Soo-hyun calmly answered that he had already checked his answers 5 different times and still could not find a single mistake anywhere. Hearing such a response only made the teacher even angrier. He loudly pointed out that the problem Soo-hyun had been given was considered one of the most difficult math questions from 10 years ago and that only 3% of students had managed to solve it correctly back then.